Hi everyone, welcome to the channel Sluggers Blue for your CAT VRC preparation. In today's session, we shall be continuing with the RC that we had taken up in the first part of the session. This RC was asked in the CAT exam, the second slot in the year 2019. I have titled the RC as Language and Essentialism. 510 words, the 4 questions. In part one of the session, we had already gone through the passage of the RC in quite some detail. And this part will be dealing with the questions here. Okay, so let's start. Okay, now for those of you who are watching, who might be watching one of these videos for the first time, I'll briefly explain to you the structure of these sessions of this course. Okay, so now guys, every single session caters to one RC, one reading comprehension, and is in turn split into two parts. The first part of the session is where I explain to you the passage of the RC in detail, and the second part of the session is where I take you through the questions of the RC. Okay, and yeah, so and 40 such sessions make up a course. 40 of these sessions make up a course which is titled as an anthology of RCs, which is directed towards your reading comprehension preparation for the CAT. All right, the current video that you're watching is the second part of this session, which caters to this particular RC. All right, so let's move on to the questions then. All right, starting with the first question. The STEM says, according to the passage, which of the following is not responsible for language's ability to change us? So again, once again, we have an inversion scenario, right? Here, that means we are supposed to select the option which is not responsible. Which essentially means that out of the 4 options provided here, 3 of them will be responsible for bringing about a change for language's ability to change us as per the passage, and one of them will not be responsible, and then that's the one that will be your answer. Okay, so let's start with the options. The first one says the ups and downs involved in the course of learning a language. Now, this is something that has been very directly mentioned in the passage in third paragraph, in fact, where the author says that this learning process, the embarrassments, the frustrations, right, the downs, the gradual sense of understanding and connection, that means the ups, basically, right? So there are some ups and downs. This learning process with these ups and downs is invariably transformative. That means it does change you. That right? So this point of reference definitely demonstrates language's ability to change us, right? So yes, we do have a proper appropriate point of reference for option A, and hence you can mark this as one of the scenarios which does contribute, right? Which is responsible, and hence you can also with that reasoning eliminate the same. Okay, because your correct answer will be the one that is not the one that is. Okay, so coming to the next option, language's ability to mediate the impact of identity markers than one is born with. Now guys, the kind of slightly complex terms that have been used in this option might almost have you uh, infer that maybe this the content of this option belong does not is not within the purview of the passage. But please don't be deceived, because let's just try to understand what exactly this option means. Okay, first of all, this term, this expression, identity markers that one is born with, is basically an expression for uh, the inborn and rigid, the human characteristics which are inborn, rigid, and outwardly defined. For example, ethnicity and gender, right? So these are the identity markers that one is born with. And the option basically says that language's ability to mediate the impact of these markers. Mediate means to almost ameliorate or mitigate, right? To almost tamper around, or at least uh, interact with the impact. That means almost tamper around the impact of these identity markers that one is born with, right? So which basically means that language's ability to counter, maybe in a sense, the impact of these markers on and thus help a person change, right? And that's something that can be inferred from these last few lines, where the author says that you are what you speak. The words that run throughout your mind are at least as fundamental to your selfhood as your ethnicity or your gender. That means and moreover, he also says that uh, it's healthy to consider human characteristics. That means language. He's referring to language. that are not inborn, rigid, and outwardly refined, and you can always learn. After all, you can always learn another language and change who you are. So essentially, what he's saying is that language, in the first part, where he says that the words that run throughout your mind are at least as fundamental to your selfhood. That means he has considered language to be equivalent in terms of how fundamental it is to a person's individuality. Um with the other identity markers such as ethnicity and gender, right? So it's as fundamental to your selfhood as ethnicity and gender. And in the second part, he says that it is also something that allows you to grow and change yourself, right? So yes, that takes care of the first part of the option, that language's ability to mediate the impact. Mediate the impact means to counter the impact, or to contribute to the impact, at least, right? So option B is also true, although it might have seemed a little not so straightforward, but it is true, and you can eliminate this as well. Option C, the twists and turns in the evolution of language over time. The twists and turns in the evolution of language over time. So, guys, the author has talked about the impact of language in terms of making a person who's learning the new language more empathetic, more understanding, more thoughtful. But regarding the evolution of language itself, the author has been completely silent. He hasn't said anything about the evolution of language over time. Forget about the twists and turns, right? The evolution has that been of the person who's learning the language and not the language itself. So this is definitely something that has not been mentioned in the passage, and hence cannot be considered responsible for language's ability to change us according to the passage, within the purview of the passage. So this is false, definitely false, and hence becomes a very good contender for our answer to this question with a capital S. Let's come to the next last option. Language's intrinsic connection to our notions of self and identity. Yes, this is exemplified. This is something that the author talks about again in the last paragraph, same point of reference. He says, "You are what you speak," right? Language's intrinsic connection to our notions of self and identity. The words that run throughout your mind are at least as fundamental to your selfhood as is your ethnicity or your gender. So again, yes, he has talked about the intrinsic connection of language to our notions of self and identity, and it can be demonstrated from this point of reference. So again, this is true, and hence can be very easily eliminated from the potential list of potential correct answers. So your correct answer here will thus finally be option C. Okay, let's move on to the next question now. Question number 2. The stem says, a French ethnographer decides to study the culture of a Nigerian tribe. So it's an application question. You can already realize, right? Because the author has anyways not talked about French ethnographer or Nigerian tribe anywhere. So it's an application question. The author is basically giving you a scenario. So a French ethnographer decides to study the culture of a Nigerian tribe. Which of the following is most likely to be the view of the author of the passage? Right. So depending on whatever we have understood with respect to the author's opinion in the context of this passage, we need to figure out which of these is most likely in this particular context. In the context of a French ethnographer deciding to study the culture of a Nigerian tribe. Okay, let's go to the first option. It says the author would discourage the ethnographer from conducting the study as Nigerian ethnographers can better understand the tribe. No, guys, the author would definitely not discourage him, because the author himself was not an Egyptian, neither a Chinese, and yet he went on to study the phenomena where the Chinese were able to do well while by selling the interesting phenomena where the Chinese were able to do well while selling lingerie to Egyptian women in a very conservative setup, right? So author himself went on and did something which was on in a similar on the similar lines, right? So obviously that makes a very strong case that the author would certainly not discourage the ethnographer. So you can very easily eliminate this option. Coming to option 2, uh, the author would encourage the ethnographer. So far so good, that's fair, but ask him or her to first learn the language of the Nigerian tribe she or he wishes to study. So that's quite accurate. That's in fact exactly what the author had done. The author knew. The author says here, I think this is the point of reference where he says that in the same way I was interested not in their lives, not because of some kind of voyeurism, but because I had also experienced Egypt and Arabic as an outsider, right? So that means and and he has talked about like learning another language and how learning that language transforms the individual. And he gives the example of the Chinese learning Arabic, and he has also given equated with that example his own experience of learning Arabic, right, and experiencing Egyptian Arabic as an outsider. And he also says that he himself spoke their languages. So yes, this is completely in line with option B. The author would encourage the ethnographer, first of all, definitely, because that's what he had done in his scenario as well, in his case as well. And it will also ask him or her to learn the language because of all the benefits that the author has mentioned here of learning the language of the Nigerian tribe that the ethnographer wishes to study. So yes, this makes a very strong case for a correct option. We're going to mark this as a capital S. Let's move on to the next option. Option C, the author would encourage the ethnographer, but ask him. So encourage the ethnographer is fair enough. That's good. That's we agree with that. Later part says, but ask him or her to be mindful of his or her racial and gender identity in the process. No, now, this is something that the author's critics might agree to, but the author would definitely not agree, would not want the ethnographer to worry about the racial and gender identity. And in fact, he would simply suggest that what option B says, that learn the language of the Nigerian tribe, so that it will help you mediate and connect better with the tribe, and help you become more empathetic, right? That, like, as happened in the case of the author. So and he wouldn't want the ethnographer to be too conscious of his or her racial and gender identity in the process, but rather just want him to focus on being more empathetic and being more accommodating, and that's something that will anyways be developed as the ethnographer learns the language, right? So no, option C, although the first part seems to be all right, but this part is not better than what we already have in option B. So we can eliminate this in light of a strong B, option B. We can eliminate option C. Okay, coming to the next one. The author would encourage the ethnographer and recommend him or her to hire a good translator for the purpose of holding interviews. Okay, so again, we are happy with this part where it says that that would encourage the ethnographer. That is quite true. But recommendation of a good translator. Now, this is totally uncalled for. In fact, it goes contrary to what the author uh, has been trying to prove throughout the passage. His message about how language can play an instrumental role in helping a person become more accommodative, empathetic, and thoughtful with respect to a different culture, right? So this is definitely like this. In fact, is on the lines of discouraging the ethnographer from learning a language, right? So which goes opposite to what the author has said, has talked about throughout the passage. So you can eliminate this option as well. And yeah, so that's about it. Your correct answer here will be option B. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. Okay, guys, so let's start with question number 3. Which of the following can be inferred from the author's claim? Which way is Oriental? Now, the point of reference for this is here, where the author says that if all of us now stand beside the same river, speaking in ways we all understand, who's looking east and who's looking west, which way is Oriental? So it's a rhetorical point. He's trying to use rhetoric to make the point that, well, as long as a group of people share a context and are able to communicate properly, well, that's all that's required, right, for empathy to be engendered, right? So anyhow, this is the point of reference. Let's check the options one by one. And we need to figure out which of the following options can be inferred from this, okay? All right. Question option 1 says globalization has mitigated cultural hierarchies and barriers. So yes, the author does talk about mitigation of cultural hierarchies and barriers, but not via globalization. The factor that has mitigated this, according to the author, has in fact been language and not globalization. So this is something that can be definitely eliminated as an instance of error of inclusion. Option A commits an error of inclusion, and you can eliminate this with a capital E. Coming to the next option, it says Orientalism is a discourse of the past from colonial times, rarely visible today. So as much as the author, as it might seem to us that the author is against Orientalism and might just agree with this, but we can't necessarily say that. So the author has been against Orientalism, but not for these reasons. He has not mentioned any reasons in terms of that it is a discourse of the past or from colonial times and it is not visible today. His reasoning is different. His reasoning is that Orientalism there's no scope for Orientalism as an outlook as long as you are able to understand the culture, you're able to connect with the culture, you're able to empathize the culture properly. So that's what his outlook is. That's what his argument is. That's how he's built his argument against Orientalism, not on the basis of Orientalism being a discourse of past or colonial time. So again, once again, these terms are have been taken from outside the purview of the passage. So even option B commits an error of inclusion here and can be eliminated with a capital E. Coming to option C, goodwill alone mitigates cultural hierarchies and barriers. Okay, once again, guys. So there has been a discussion about mitigating cultural hierarchies and barriers, but and in fact, you can also infer that yeah, maybe the author has talked about goodwill, not goodwill directly, but he has talked about empathy. He has talked about being thoughtful, right? Chinese becoming more thoughtful by their learning process and becoming more accommodative, etc. Something these things can be inferred, and it seems like yes, goodwill is probably not so wrong here, but this is something that the author has not mentioned so directly. So you might just want to put this option on hold, and we will consider it. We might consider going for it if we are not able to find a more direct option. Okay, that can be inferred from these lines. Let's come to the next one. So option D, learning another language might mitigate cultural hierarchies and barriers. Now this is completely, absolutely spot on. That's in fact what he's trying to say. The point, even at the point of reference, he says that if all of us now stand beside the same river, that means share the same context and speaking in ways which we all understand, that means, well, like the one who doesn't know the language, the one who's coming from outside to study probably has learned the language so that they all understand each other, right? So that can mitigate cultural hierarchies and barriers. So this is totally spot on and will be selected with the capital S. So now, in light of option D, you can definitely now eliminate option C, right? Now it makes a strong case to eliminate option C. Otherwise, goodwill was at least better than option C, was at least better than E and B. Okay, but your answer will obviously be option D. That is your correct answer. Okay, I hope that's clear. Okay, so question number 4. The stem says the author's critics would argue that language, the point of reference for the author's critics is here, right? This is where the author has cited the the responses from his critics with respect to his New Yorker article, right? But as I often find with topics that involve the Middle East, people had trouble getting past the black and white quality of a byline. This piece is so Orientalist, I don't know what to do. Aisha Ghani, a reporter who worked at the Guardian, tweeted. And the colleague at the British paper, Iman Amrani, agreed I wouldn't have minded an article on the subject written by an Egyptian woman. Probably would have had better insight. This is the point of reference, apt point of reference. And based on this, we need to figure out which of these options the author's critics are most likely to argue, right? The first one says language is insufficient to bridge cultural barriers. So yes, they might in fact argue that because that's the point that the author has made. That yes, because I had I had gone through the difficult process of difficult and at the same time transformative process of learning the language of the Chinese and the Egyptians. I was in fact in a position where I could empathize with them, and hence the case of Orientalism is uh, is baseless. The case that the critics have made for Orientalism is baseless, and then to that, the author's critics might argue, okay, that they might make an argument. No, you're wrong. Language, as you say, is not sufficient to bridge cultural barriers. So yes, this is something that we can imagine the author's critics to be arguing. So this can be selected. I'm marking this as a weak selection as of now because well, we might just stumble across a better option. Let's check the next one. Empathy can overcome identity politics. Empathy can overcome identity politics. Okay. So guys, identity politics is a point of reference which the author talks about here. And the critics' point of view or stand with respect to identity politics is something that has not been talked about or hinted at anywhere in the passage. So whether empathy can overcome, in fact, forget about the critics. Even the author hasn't talked about identity politics. Identity politics has simply been used as a referral background to say that, okay, for all our current interest in identity politics, and there is such a thing as identity politics that we are generally interested in, but there is no corresponding sense of identity linguistics, right? So that he just used this as a referential backdrop to make the point that there is nothing like no notion like identity linguistics. And forget about the critics going and connecting the idea of empathy with identity politics. Identity politics. So this is totally uncalled for and hence can be eliminated with the capital E. Coming to option C, linguistic politics can be raised. Linguistic politics can be raised. Okay, so again, linguistic politics. The author says that identity linguistics, there's nothing like identity linguistics. So even if you allow for the equivalence that linguistic politics maybe probably is the same as identity linguistics, which we don't have enough reason to believe, but still, if you allow for that, even then it doesn't come close anywhere to the point of reference where the critics have said anything. And in fact, the critics have said nothing about anti-linguistics or any kind of politics, in fact, here, right? So whether it can be raised, and in fact, according to the author, even if you allow for the equivalence of linguistic politics and identity linguistics, even the author basically has made the point that there is no corresponding sense of this. So if the author says that there is no corresponding sense of this, the critics would definitely not support it by saying that okay, maybe even if it does exist, it can be erased, right? And most importantly, guys, you don't really need to go that far to make such a connection, because that will, you'll end up committing the error of assumption in that case. So anyways, the critics have not, nowhere is there a hint where the critics seem to have talked about this. Okay, so option E can also, C can also be eliminated with the capital E. Coming to the last one, the author says Orientalism cannot be the option says the Orientalism cannot be practiced by Egyptians is something that the author critics would argue. Okay, now Orientalism is, well, the only people who cannot probably practice, who might not be in a position to practice Orientalism probably would be the Orientals, like that means people from Asia, right? And Egypt is not Asia, so Orientalism cannot be practiced by Egyptians. First of all, is not something that the author's critics might argue. Uh, but I do however recognize the fact that some of you guys may have uh, it may have been like, it is likely that some of you guys may have inferred this from this part, from this last line, where this Iman Amrani's quote has been cited, where he says, "I wouldn't have minded an article on the subject written by an Egyptian woman." That means, which means that the critic that he believes that Orientalism cannot be practiced by Egyptians, right? So yes, so in that sense, it does seem to come a little close, but and hence I probably would not use a capital E to eliminate this, maybe a small e, or might just put this option on hold. But if you compare this option with option A, language is insufficient to bridge cultural barriers is something that they will definitely argue. Okay, so, and moreover, please consider that it is more likely that the author's arguments might be based, might be directed towards addressing the contention, the points that the author is offering as a defense, offering as his defense, while making the case that his was not the case of Orientalism, right? So their arguments or critics might be more directed uh, towards countering what the author is saying, and the author is saying that language is sufficient to bridge cultural barriers, and hence they would be more likely to counter this point by saying that language is insufficient, rather than just make the point that Orientalism cannot be practiced by Egyptians, and which would go quite tangent to what the author has been the point that the author has been trying to make. So as much as I do recognize that this is not a strong elimination case, probably, and many of you may have inferred it from this, but still, in light of option A, this is something that you'd still would not want to go for. The correct answer would be option A here. Okay, so yeah, so we're done with question number 4. Okay, guys, so let's start with the vocabulary section. Now, the way we intend to go about this is on the left side, you can see the passage has been provided with certain words and expressions that have been highlighted here. And on the right side, we have the list, the same words and expressions have been listed with their respective meanings, primarily contextual meanings. Okay, and the way you're expected to go about this is pause the video and go through every expression or word in the context, in its context, basically as part of the sentence where it appears, and then check. Then once you've read the word as part of the sentence where it appears, then check the meaning of the word on the right side. Okay, and do the same for repeat the same for every word that you may have found difficult or challenging to understand. I will not be going through the meaning of each and every word in this list because we anyways intend to have courses dedicated to just vocabulary as part of other playlists. Okay, so yeah, so that's about this section. Pause the video and go through, do the exercise if you found the words challenging, and we're gonna move on to the next one now. All right, guys, so let's start with the analysis and reading section of the video. So starting with analysis, RC analysis first, the genre for this RC is here. Now, for those of you who might have faced difficulty in the topic of the RC with respect to the topic of the RC, the ideas discussed, or maybe even the terminology of the RC, you would definitely benefit from reading more content from the same genre. The readability of the RC, or not the RC, the passage. Okay, the readability is just of the passage, right? So it basically shows you how difficult or easy the passage was to comprehend. It has been scored out of 10. It is based on a variant of Fleshkin-CAD grade level scale that is the most ubiquitously used readability scale across various types of text. So it is quite reliable. So it is based on the variant of this. So from this, you can gauge how readable or easy or difficult to comprehend the passage was. Next, the length of the passage is also provided here. I would suggest that you better the parameter that you should use for understanding or for checking the length of passage should not be just the number of words, but rather number of words that you are required to read for answering for every question that you need to answer, right? So and which for cat RCs is usually around 100 words per question, plus minus 15 to 20% sometimes. So you can take this as a benchmark and compare how lengthy or not so lengthy this passage was, and accordingly incorporate steps in your strategy to address if you faced issues in terms of because of the passage length. Coming to the last part of the analysis, ideal time to solve the RC is the total time is listed here. Time required to you that you should have taken up while reading the passage should have been less than this, and for question should have been less than this, and this is the overall total, right? So yeah, so that's the ideal time. Finally, suggested readings for this based on this RC, based on this genre, and based on this RC, a couple of articles have been picked up, which the title and the author and the platform where they are available have been provided here, and the links to these articles are provided in the description of the this YouTube video. Okay, so you can check out those articles and read those, go through those to get some more exposure in this genre and in this topic. Okay, so that completes the reading and analysis part of this section of this session. Okay, guys, so with this, we have solved the second passage of the second genre, culture and social sciences. Three more to go so far as this genre is concerned. First genre we had already completed earlier with 5 passages. If you have not watched those, you can go to the playlist of this course and Anthology of RCs on the channels page and watch the videos of those sessions. Attend the passages and watch the videos. And yeah. Okay, guys, so with this, we have come to the conclusion of the session. Now, for those of you who have not watched the first part of this particular RC, this particular session, you can click here on this card and it will take you on this video and it will take you to the first part where you can go through the passage explainer to understand the passage in detail. And for those of you who want to watch the intro video of the course, you can click on this card here. It will take you to the intro video of the course, and for those and others again, and definitely if you like the session, do share it with others who might find it helpful and useful, and definitely Do subscribe to the channel Stuckers Blue for your CAT free RC preparation. All right, I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.